Hi, everyone. Raghu, and I'm back with Mindrolling, and someone I've known of for quite some time, but we've never met, John Tarrant. John, welcome to the show, as they say.
I'm glad to be here, Raghu. we've been delayed by all sorts of things, including fires. Yeah,
fires and whatever.
I figure
else.
It's fate that we're here now, and it's good. Yeah. We'll trust that.
What would you do? You went out. So everybody, what happened? We were going to do it when the fires started out in Los Angeles, and they were cutting power, and so we couldn't do it. And then John, you went to Japan.
Yeah.
What did you? Yeah. I always wondered. What were you teaching over there?
So no. It's just I know a bunch of people over there, and I was just visiting, and it's sort of nice for me sometimes to, I don't know, go somewhere and not teach, actually.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I like the gardens and things like that. And there's a beautiful little temple just outside of Kyoto that I love. That's 900s, built in 800s and 900s, and restored a million times. And I know that the guy who runs it is really sweet.
Just for everybody, John teaches Zen. And he writes, and he's a poet and studied koans, which we'll mention that obviously at some point here. And and a Jungian person as a psychologist as well. So I love that mix. That's why I thought Ram Dass was, one of the most essential things about him, how he could bring in the psychological with the spiritual and have people not do spiritual bypassing. Yeah. Which you have referred to here and there. Well, but what was your origin story where you found out, oh shit, there is something beyond that thinking that I'm doing in the eye? Wow. Well, I'm going to go after that.
The pain in my head was a pain in the ass, I suppose. It was like, I didn't notice my mind was kind of wild, and I was trying to do good things for the world. I was actually originally doing Aboriginal land rights work in Australia, because I'm Australian originally. And
I don't know that.
Aboriginal land rights.
Aboriginal
indigenous people's land rights.
Wow.
And who are just treated as badly as indigenous people always are, and so I thought, I grew up with, indigenous people and thought, I don't know, I want to see if I can do something about this. And so there was a big movement at that time, and so we did. I worked in a senator's office in the parliament and did other things, and went out into the bush with people, and I noticed that everybody was enraged about getting peace, sort of thing. Everybody was enraged about it. And the Aborigines themselves were kind of, sometimes they get really annoyed, but they're fairly calm people with a deep feeling of practice about them. People from out in the desert, and I thought, they liked animals and they liked the forest, and I thought, So I originally then went out into the forest and thought, well, I'll just listen to the forest. And gradually my mind became free. So that was sort of and later on I thought, wow, I learned to meditate by going into the forest. And I thought, so that was kind of arrogant. The forest taught me. It took me in. It was a little bit human-centric, that view. And then later on I ran into... The other story that's probably worth telling is I was working in publishing in a book company, and this woman, I ran into this woman I hardly knew actually, but I kind of seemed friendly, and on a street corner in Brisbane in Australia, and I asked, I said, oh, what are you up to, and what are you up to? And I'd been going out to an island there, to an Aboriginal camp out there. Indigenous people's camp there, and and she said, "Oh, you might be interested. I'm going off to some Tibetan masters are coming, and they're going to do a month-long retreat." I didn't know anything about what Tibetans taught. I knew it was in the Himalayas. That was about it. Didn't know anything about Buddhism really, and And I said to her, how do I get hold of them? And she immediately got what was going on. She said, you can go, but if you do, you won't come back.
He said,
and I thought that was a beautiful thing about if you go into the deep path, you won't come back. And that was true. As it happened, I did that retreat, and then I ended up being involved in Zen and the whole Chinese tradition. But she was right, basically.
Who was the Tibetan teacher, though?
It was Lama Yeshe.
Lama Yeshe.
And Lama Zopa. Yeah, they taught us.
Zopa. Who just
they taught us
passed recently.
Yeah. And Lama Yeshe passed a long time ago.
Yeah.
But so they had a good cop, bad cop thing. And
Okay.
Lama Yeshe would say, "Oh, good day to get in line," and things like that. And Lama Zopa would say, "You seem very unsettled. We should spend more time meditating on the hell realms." But it was sort of, a purification. That was a purifying thing, and they didn't. I don't know what they did later, but there was early days, and they just taught advanced deity yoga to anybody who wandered in. It's kind of great. So I learned to visualize the deity and bring them over your top of your head and then become them, which is rather a beautiful meditation, really. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I think that is an important thing. I mean, in terms of the Poa in the Book of the Dead,
right?
Book of the Dead, right? To bring the Buddha or your guru into your third eye and merge with he and she. So yeah.
And it's sort of and also at a more simple level, you realize, I am Buddha, or Buddha can take me over for a while, or something like that. That the Buddha can't be other than what's here, and that's a profound thing that everybody's always reaching somewhere else and not looking inside,
Yeah, but that goes to the thing. I've told this story before, but I spent, because of Ram Dass, Roshi Joan Halifax, who I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of time with him, and they were really close and so on. So, and his whole thing was Guru Kripa, our thing, basically, or the grace of the Guru. But it was more, I mean, I hate to take this to a level where, there's something special in any way. And the reality is we are that God Guru self, Ramana Maharshi's thing. So, but it's a practice of duality, right? And bhakti yoga. So I did a podcast or something. I think I was doing a podcast with her. And I just said, Roshi, you see Neem Karoli Baba and all, you've been around Ram Dass and you see these pictures and so on and a lot of stories and all that. What is your take? And she said, when I look in his eyes, I see emptiness. And then I said, that's, in fact, Ram Dass, who was asked one time, how do you describe Neem Karoli Baba? And he said the same thing. He was so empty. And he and Joseph Goldstein had a wonderful talk once about empty and love are the same thing. Joseph said, well, yeah, it's not pleasant I empty you. It's way more pleasant I love you. It was so great. So then she said, Roshi Halifax said, well, to me, you have to move on at some point out of this dual nature practice. I mean, it'll serve its purpose perhaps, but so I said to her, yeah, no, I'm completely down, Roshi. I don't know how many 100,000 lifetimes more. Maybe I got to get to that place where I'm willing to do that. But right now, we had a fun dialogue.
That's nice. Yeah. I like that I think that was one of the things that attracted me about Zen. I felt that Zen and Tibetan were fundamentally the same, although I didn't know that then. There's a whole Dzogchen equals Zen thing, which you'll find a lot if you talk to Dzogchen people. And and then and Zen ideally doesn't have a lot of apparatus, I found, and I don't know. So I liked that. Although I noticed the apparatus I learned that day at yoga often still comes back to me from long ago.
Really?
Yeah. I'm falling asleep at night, and there's Chenrezig, who's the Avalokiteshvara of the Tibetans, and here filling my body, like that. And it's a nice thing. I'll take it. But yeah, but it's not that one is, if you're having tea or you're, with a kid or something, there it is. It's right there. That there's not a difference between you, really. And I think the Zen thing, I think the Tibetan thing is too, but the Zen thing was pretty good about each piece of the universe contains the whole thing, the whole of the universe. And I suppose people notice that if they take mushrooms. but
Definitely.
It's also a beautiful thing to have somehow come out of a practice where it sort of feels stable and steady, And that's what I liked about it. That's how I end up where I was, So,
yeah. Well, where is this? You do say something that prompted me. And it was around overly orient. I'm just taking a little, it's a little bit out of a longer read. Overly oriented towards clarity. We are overly spirit-oriented, and you'll have to explain spirit and the soul, how you define that. But overly oriented towards clarity and certainty and linear process. I can't tell you, I'm referring a lot to Ram Dass because, we work together all these years, and it's still going on. But he was
still do, in fact.
Yeah. Exactly. But, he always had a thing that he would express. And Ram Dass was really, never in any way negative. It wasn't like that. But he would say just that. There's he would put it more, I may be bringing it down a little in too much simplicity, but he would say there is a large trap door for many Buddhists who become attached to that supreme crystalline clarity that Buddhism as a reality represents. And that's when he would urge people to not forget the heart. And that's why he came up with that loving awareness meditation.
Yeah. You can tell he's right, just like it is simple like that, Haku, the great medieval Zen koan master Hakuin, used to say to people when they're in that crystalline place, he'd say, you're watching a corpse in a coffin. And it was that stillness, and that he thought it was sort of dead. And there are a lot of expressions in Zen, like 1,000 miles of snow or something like that. And that's emptiness, but in some way, something else, you need to truly live your life. And so that's why, Zen has always been, the Tibetans are like that too. They always come out of the monastery and you do things, or you look after people in some way, and you care about them. And sometimes you're an idiot and you care about that too, You're kind about that too, to not be self-blaming and things like that are very, very important,
So very important.
And that's somehow coming out of when you're in that crystalline place, you can't, well, it's true you can get there through meditating, but then you're not really, you're not
embodying, right? You're not embodying.
And you're also not taking the times when you feel like an idiot and ashamed of yourself and things like that, because whatever, maybe you were wrong actually, and you shouldn't be, but you do. And then you realize, I can be at peace with that. I can be at peace with everything that comes, so don't have to squash things like that,
Why don't you talk about, I found this interesting, just going back through some of the things that you've written, just the I thought this was a very unique handling of spirit and soul, which, of course, in Buddhist tradition, it's not, there ain't no soul.
Right.
But, yeah.
Well, yeah, it's sort of like that clarity, that spiritual clarity is really important. And it's marvelous, and certainly it's what I wanted. My mind was not at peace. I couldn't get it to be still and things like that. And so often when I was just teaching actually in Japan, I was just teaching somebody to meditate, and he said, I'm not doing it right. My mind is not still. I have a lot of thoughts. And so that's your, 101 problem, error.
Yeah.
That you think you're supposed to do something or get somewhere. And if you stop doing that, you might find that you're already there. So that sort of thing, which is sort of elementary, but we always make that mistake. We reject our inner life. And so, what I noticed is in the West, there was a lot of stuff about soul, and James Hillman was good on this, and Jung was too, really, but James Hillman was the guy who really worked a lot of this out. And so that there's another quality of development if somebody's got soul, and so where they can feel, if they feel sorrowful, it goes into their dharma and into their teaching and into their being in a way that can be beautiful. And it's not a bad thing. And then it naturally, the universe gets away from us and does what it does. Mm-hmm. And so, and frees us, and that we have that delicious kind of quality, really, of the beauty of, the beauty of what it is to be human and fully human, and to love and to sorrow and feel hurt and all those things. And then we don't, at a certain stage, we kind of calm about that, but not because we've flattened it all out. It's enriched us. And so I think of that as soul, I found in the light and side of the dark I mentioned, I found a Christian image, a bunch of Christian images, medieval images of Christ ascending out of the painting with just his feet showing. And that's attempting to go all into spirit, but soul is very interested in those feet, and the child and all that sort of thing. So when I mention this in the book, but when I started teaching, I was teaching a lot in Australia because I'm Australian, knew the people there. And I decided I wasn't going to fly around and just leave my kid, and I would take my kid with me, who was at first pretty young, she was 10 months old, and took her across the Pacific. And Buddha left home in this famous way where he went out silently. They wrapped the horses' hooves and with grass, and the demons held up, or the earth spirits held up their hands so the horses could step silently out of the palace. But I said, but I took my daughter with me, and she wailed all the way across the Pacific in that bassinet they used to. I think they do sometimes still have in the bulkhead seats of the long haul jets, and it was like, but it was interesting because then one of the flight attendants came and gave me a bottle of champagne from first class and said, "It's hard to have a nipper," which is a strange expression for a kid, and it was very sweet. So even that made us interact with the kindness of people, and that was really nice. So
that from soul point of view,
and that's a soul thing, the flight attendant has no idea about spirituality and he's just waiting to get to Sydney and go on a date or something. But he's a kind person. He has that in him. He has that soulful quality in him,
which everyone has.
And good psychotherapy or depth psychotherapy, it works with dreams and works with the unconscious forces and things, and it's not just trying to calm you down or something. That's legitimate, but there's a deeper thing. then good psychotherapy has some regard for this. And Ramdas that was his big. He was very good at that.
Yeah, he sure was. What
Embodying that.
Yeah. What do you mean? There's a whole part of life that could be neglected when we pursue spirit.
Well, I noticed this. You notice that in monasteries sometimes people get very bad-tempered and things like that because there's a part. Some things go into what we might call shadow. Your certain impulses. It's not like they have to run. But being at peace is to be at peace with the whole of you, with your sorrow and your frustration, your anger, and all those things, and then they can appear, and you're not fighting with, you're not holding them off. They're just, in some way, they're like they fertilize your practice, like rain on the earth. And you don't object to them so much. And so, as a teacher, teaching people not to disapprove of what their heart brings up in meditation is one of the big tasks. If you stop disapproving of things, the world will not disapprove of you. So,
since you have this, somehow Jung came along in your life, right?
Dreams, yeah.
Just the one, particularly relevant around the shadow, which is one of his main things. Yeah, talk about that. That's important.
Well, I came out of a monastery, and I thought, well, I better come out of the monastery sometime. And that was good. I liked that, and everybody thought you would. And so you went into the monastery for a while, and then you came out, which is sort of what the Chinese did a lot, And then I thought, well, what will I do? And I had a connection when I was very young, and when I first met the Tibetans, with this woman came to stay. And I was in undergraduate school, actually. A woman came to stay with us who was related to one of the kids in the house. And she would sit out in the garden. She was very old, and she'd sit in the garden for about an hour or two every morning under an elm tree. And I said, what are you doing? And she said, I'm working with my dreams. And she was a Jungian analyst, so she just sort of landed in my lap in that way. And she said, I said, so what's that like? She said, well, give me a dream. And so I did. And she worked with the symbolic nature of the dreams. And there was a tremendous kindness and feeling of depth. You didn't say, this means that. It's like snake means a penis or something like that. It wasn't that primitive kind of stuff, but it was very deep. And after I talked to her, I felt very encouraged. But then I sort of forgot about it and went on to grad school and things. But I always remembered her. And when I decided I wanted something to do, I started looking for things in the inner life that would help complement Zen. A lot of people came from psychotherapy to Buddhism, but I was going the other way. And I felt that I thought that Zen did something amazing, and so did like the Tibetans. But I didn't. I thought there's something as a whole, for the whole of life. You need something that could grow out of your own culture in that way. And I couldn't quite become Japanese or Chinese, although I had a lot of sympathy for and interest in the cultures. And so how to bring it here. And so dreams and psychotherapy. And so they went and got a PhD and all that stuff. But, and so then I stopped. After I did it for about 10 years or so, I stopped doing it because I sort of felt like, and then I moved back into Zen. I was always in Zen, but now in Zen, people who work with me and with the people I train, they also do ask people about their dreams and things like that, as well as what's happening with your koan, and your koan story. And koans are a little bit like dreams. They're these little stories that go into the psyche in a non-rational way.
Yeah.
So I try to integrate those two things, but which has been my life's work, actually, to bring the imagination into Buddhism.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I mean, the reality around, like I had a Jungian therapist, long time ago. And it was after I had met Neem Karoli Baba. He was, my guru. And he had the spaciousness that I feel is so necessary if anybody's really going to help you. He wasn't into gurus. And of course, he was well-versed in Eastern stuff. I mean, he knew, but that wasn't his thing whatsoever. I'd walk in the room and sit down, and he said, why don't we see what Maharaj-ji's up to? Let's just sit and, empty ourselves and allow... I mean, can you imagine that?
That's very wonderful. That's imaginative, isn't it?
Yeah. So, that's what triggered me to think about him in particular.
Yeah.
Boy.
Yeah. So I suppose in terms of this, this book,
what's the name?
This is the story of the Buddha. Yes, the story of
that.
The Buddha.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You got to hold that up.
Yeah.
More steady. We're going to be on YouTube.
The story of the Buddha. Yeah. That.
This book, by the way, is it's beautiful, and it's a small book you can take anywhere you want. You don't even have to put it on your device, and which I hate reading. And has some of the most beautiful images. I mean, you really, I don't know how you managed, but there's really extraordinary images around the story of the Buddha.
Right. Well, what we did was we decided there's the horse. Whoops. Anyway, you can't see too well here, but there's the horse. Buddha's leaving, and he's got to leave his horse, and the horse weeps. Things like that. So it's very touchy. That's soul stuff.
Yeah.
There's
very much.
Soul in the thing, and the horse weeps, and his companion weeps, and then Buddha goes off to find his new life, or in a way to shed his old life, really. So I thought I'd heard the story a few times, and it just seemed a bit stiff.
What, the story of the
Buddha? Yeah. It seemed a bit, this guy leaves his kid, and he so on, and all that. And you just can't work out how to do the old stories, but they're probably not completely true. You can tell that. It's like, and so I thought about the Greek stories, the Odyssey and things like that, and how Odysseus is just dying to get home to his dog and his wife and his kid and things like that. Even though his home is full of troubles and he'll have to fight for it and things. But Buddha had all that. He had everything. And he was dying to leave. And I kind of understood. I said to a couple of my friends who are women, like, what do you think about that? And she said, every mother wants to get away from her kids sometimes.
Yeah.
And so there was that. But I said, and so I felt like in some way the peace and the kindness and the emptiness, the spaciousness of the Buddha had to be found inside our lives, inside the lives we have, inside the lives with children or the lives with friends or love affairs or whatever it is, and inside the lives with fires and, ecological problems and things like that. And so that's what so I decided, I don't know how to do that really, but I decided there must be a way, so I'd have to find out. And that's why I dragged my kid across the Pacific. And then we did. And people said, well, we don't do childcare at Zen retreats and sessions, touch the heart mind. And I said, well, it says touch the heart as well as the mind, so we'll have to find a way to do childcare.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting that I read that. What you do at these retreats, it's amazing because it is what we do, what Ram Dass always did, and we still do today at retreats. I mean, tons of kids, and we get people like writing feedback.
Yeah,
having these kids running through the aisles and all of that is very distracting, and I'm not sure.
That's the point. Yeah. That's where you find peace. Yeah.
Yeah.
So exactly. It was good. It was good for the kids. And now that generation has all grown up and is off doing things, although they drop in from, like, my daughter drops in and does a retreat about every year, usually once a year or something like that. But so flies in from Edinburgh, So it's sort of I think it's more about how can you include the whole of you. You don't, when people talk about the crystalline consciousness, they're splitting off the shadow in some way. And Ram Dass was very strong on this, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
And,
we have to have a little bit of explication of emptiness. Okay? Because this, everybody listening may have heard the word emptiness or may be completely into the essence of what it represents. But I think people do tend to go towards a nihilistic kind of a thing. I mean, emptiness, it's like nothing. Shit, I don't want it,
Yeah.
Robert Thurman, he, to me, has the best definition for emptiness, and that is the womb of compassion.
Well, that's great. It's a very Tibetan attitude. That's really wonderful. Yeah. Well, it's the Sanskrit word is shunyata, and the Chinese didn't know what to do with this, but they use the character for sky for it. And so they said the sky. And so your mind is like the sky, and that's a very Tibetan meditation too. And I think I don't think emptiness is a thing you have to sort of break into or something, but it's or a place. But it's like at a certain stage you stop worrying and you stop clinging to things and you stop wanting things to be different, including especially yourself. And you stop complaining that, the circumstance have prevented me from fill in the blank, whatever it was, And after you realize, oh, that's a kind of suffering, and you stop, it falls away. I wouldn't say you assault it and get rid of it or something. It just falls away and you just don't mind anymore,
Yeah.
It's kind of nice.
Yeah. When we do discuss this, especially with people who, the first time they came to a retreat or something.
Yeah.
And I always say, well, that I that you walk around with?
Right.
And the belief in every thought, every story, and associated with your habitual patterns and neurotic tendencies, that thing?
Yeah.
And they go, yeah, well, and that's what you're empty of.
On the nose.
Hopefully.
That's what you're. Yeah. Whatever it is you think you are, it's not that.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And it's true that it's a sort of relief not to have to worry about impressing people and being depressed about what they say and regarding yourself as so important. You have to manage what people say about you and things like that. It's like, I don't know. You can't ever get that stuff right. So there's a casual freedom about that in the Dharma.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's a big part of our culture right now. That's grown by enormous leaps and bounds. Maybe it's just more sophisticated the way it's happening, but it's
Yeah, the Hawaiians have this saying: "It's more worse yet." It's like that, but cultures are always like a little crazy like that. And I was just talking with Bill Porter, the Red Pine, the Chinese translator, and one of the people who works with him is a woman called Spring Chen, who learned to sing in the traditional Chinese ways, the traditional Dharma songs, and tremendously moving and beautiful traditional poetry. And she said she grew up during the Cultural Revolution, and she said, well, these things happen. And she said, everybody's at conflict and everybody's trying to get other people to be a certain way and things. And these things happen. You never know how bad they'll get, but sometimes they get bad and sometimes they don't. And sometimes people are thrown out of tall buildings, and other times it's just bad for a while and gets better. So we don't know.
But they're in the moment, and this is, of course, going on very much
absolutely.
so right now. In the moment, okay, what can I contribute in any possible way around whatever, social action, environmental, political, whatever it may be? What can I do? But at the same time, the first thing I can do is straighten out my own heart.
I think the inner life,
the balance there.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you. Keep going.
No. Just addressing that balance.
I think the inner life is the thing that gets thrown overboard, and everybody thinks somebody else is the problem, or somebody's in the way of my wealth or my happiness or something. And so to work with the inner, I mean, my time working for land rights for Indigenous people was valuable in that way, because there were, we had a lot of our meetings in pubs, and people would get really drunk and yell at each other and stuff, and I thought, well, this is a good place to meditate, and so I had to meditate. I had rules that I had to meditate in the morning, but also in the evening when I came home. So that meant don't drink too much if you go and meditate. So. Although it was a social thing, But so I would, but then I kind of felt like, well, the old people out in the desert, they were always at peace. They were calm. They didn't, terrible things were sometimes happening, but they wouldn't lose it themselves, And they gradually worked away for more rights and so on, but they didn't lose their tempers, and they didn't stop negotiating with people, and they didn't all that sort of thing. And so I was listening to them when I went out into the forest to, see what the forest could teach me.
Yeah, that's so great that happened to you. Fortunate to be in the right place.
Well, I was just trying to do social action, really, and I happened to know some Indigenous people, and that was nice. But then I realized that if you can work with the inner life, some of the other stuff will follow. So you have to work with the inner life, and if you don't work with the inner life, well, you're at the mercy of things. The mercy of everyone's words, is the old Chinese saying. You will be at the mercy of everyone's words. And so it's nice to be at peace, whatever's happening. A lot of those, in the story of the Buddha book, I mentioned, some teachers who, civil war came through, and they're trying to teach their people have an inner life, and the great wars would pass to and fro, and see if you can have an inner life.
Your writing is beautiful. It really is, John. It's so poetic. I want to read one thing, which is really it's the beginning, more of the introduction to this book. The Buddha investigated the mind with meditation, wonder, questioning, and helpless persistence. Okay.
That's a good one, isn't
it? That's great. That's what I mean. After him, people went into their own hearts to look. They stepped into the silence in which the beginning was still present. You could find the gaps inside anything. Every event and every object had these gaps. Reminds me of Trungpa Rinpoche, actually. And when you rested there, you found a place before loss or death and before a need for healing. From this primordial openness, everything seemed to flower. The emptiness itself had a vast imagination. It's good. But you couldn't take yourself with you.
That's true.
That's the ultimate. That is the ultimate. Oh, my.
Yeah, you can't take yourself with you.
Really?
And in fact, you realize you don't want to after a while. At first, all your efforts are in that direction, but yeah.
Yeah, really. What else did I have in my mind here? I mean, this book, first of all, when I got it, the publisher sent it to me, I thought, I've read the story of the Buddha a billion times before. What could this possibly be?
Right.
But as you get from what I just read, everybody who's out there, this is a profoundly heart-opening interpretation, if you want, of the story of the Buddha. And you obviously had that very much in mind.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I found every time I heard the story of the Buddha, I would get annoyed, and I thought, that's not good. Don't be annoyed, John. And so then I thought, well, I need to. The imagination works through stories, so I'll start teaching the story of the Buddha and see if I can, in a way, feel my way into it better, And so I taught it for a long time. I'm slow at these things, but I taught it for, I don't know, I first started teaching it about 15 years ago or something like that.
The story of the Buddha?
Yeah, and I'd have a day-long retreat or a 2-day retreat or something, and I'd just tell the story. And
really?
then I'd get people to, well, what strikes you? What part do you have in it? And then gradually it spun out to like a 60-page story with novelistic characters, and then went down to a fairy tale, and then it came out to the current story, which felt about right, the one I have in the book. And so I just decided to trust it and go into it. And what did it do with my imagination, this great story? Because it's a great story. And then on the other hand, it tells this crazy thing about you have to leave your newborn kid and things like that, and everything you love. And it's got to have a deep point in that, I thought. It's not just heartless and all that sort of thing. And so I felt like as I kept telling it, it kept refining, and the language got more refined, I suppose. And so then I thought, after a while I stopped. I was still teaching it as one days and things, and what we would do is say, well, where are you in the story of the Buddha? Are you leaving home, or are you just sitting out, or are you discovering you don't have to hate the darkness in the world, which is part of his thing. Mara is the demon, but also Mara is kind of lonely and wants a friend, things like that. So if you let your imagination go into it, you realize how things really are. How things really are is, if you talk to people who've been to war, they don't necessarily hate their enemies, that sort of thing, They have a compassion for the world. So that was kind of fun. And then people would say, well, where I am in my life is, and they talk about their life, and suddenly it became spiritual, their life, through that. They opened their heart and it became spiritual. And so then it was, that every time I told that story, we'd have to close the retreat because too many people subscribed and things.
Oh, wow. That's great. Great problem. How about this? It's not so hard to work out what we want to escape from in our minds. It's easy to notice how anger narrows us and how despair implies a firm belief in a predictable future. Empires and dominions fail, and that includes the dominion of the self and who we imagine we are. What we step into is stranger. We step into a not knowing. I mean, that is a great, great thing to share with people. And of course, I'm reminded of Bernie Glassman, Zen. And how he, especially the latter stages of his life, that was a big, big part of it. And not knowing. And and people may, of course, you can take this in many different ways. It's not being an idiot, not knowing. Okay, it's nothing to do with that.
Yeah. Well, it's not having a false certainty. Is what it is. And
right. That's an idiot.
Smart tech people often understand this. There's a famous koan, which I think is in this book, but this kid comes around and he's on pilgrimage and meets an old master and who puts him up for the night and looks after him and feeds him and things and says, and then he says, as the kid's about to leave the next morning, he says, "What are you up to? What are you doing?" And he says, "Well, I'm wandering about on pilgrimage." There's a famous Zen story. And I'm wandering about. And then he says, "Well, why are you doing that?" And the kid he's thought that was a virtuous thing. It's never occurred to him to ask why. "Why am I doing that?" "I don't know," he said. Mm-hmm. And then the teacher says this famous thing, "Not knowing is most intimate." And the kid's heart opens and the kid then wants to go off and feel wise and stuff. And the teacher says, "I don't know, stay for another 10 years, I think." So, but they're not, you can tell isn't when my mind wants to assert things and it's just hard. Like there's no, one is armored, and so one of the nice things about people who are really wise is they're not certain about a lot of things. They can laugh and they're easy and they don't have to prove they're right and things like that. So that's the not knowing is about that.
Yeah. And the self-seriousness.
Yeah.
Goes away.
And scientists will do that. Like, you have a friend who studied with Gregory Bateson, the great scientist.
Oh, yeah.
And his Gregory was always saying, that person takes himself seriously. So I think that's a kind of Zen saying, don't have to take yourself so seriously,
Yeah. We've been talking haikus and Zen sayings a little bit. Oh, and I'll mention this because it seems appropriate. We're doing a course that we do these courses, online courses, and bring all kinds of people like you. In fact, you may get a call shortly about this, but
right.
It is intimacy with all things. Dogen.
Isn't that great?
That's so great. So
yeah, the title just gives you so much already.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, we had to, of course, have a subtitle: relationship with self, with other, with environment, with the world in general, and so on.
And I'm all for that too.
Yeah. Right. So. Well, here's one of Cohen. I love reading, especially poetic stuff. So excuse me for trumping on it. And so a student asked Zhao Zhu, "Does a dog have Buddha nature or not?" And Zhao Zhu said, "No. Dog, Buddha nature, completely manifesting it all, with one instant of quote unquote has or quote unquote doesn't have, you lose your life."
Yeah. It's kind of great, yeah.
There's a beauty in, everybody who maybe hasn't heard koans or hasn't heard, these wonderful Zen sayings and so on. There's a beauty, and that beauty lies in it. It cracks something open. I mean, that's you should explain it more better.
No, you're doing a great more better. That's another Hawaiian saying, isn't it? It's you're doing such a great job. It's nice to see it come out through your consciousness and your awareness. So yeah, it's like when you get lost in it's this way, then somebody else will say, "Well, isn't it that way as well?" And you'll have to say, "Oh yeah, you're right." So that's the uncertainty, is this sort of cloud of imagination that is around everything. And painters talk about that and poets talk about that. I have to go into this guy, really interesting guy who's a tech guy and has a tech startup that's kind of hot right now. But when he first came, the rhinoceros book, Bring Me the Rhinoceros, and he just wrote me this letter saying, I really wanted to go into something I didn't know about. He's a mathematician. He's very used to knowing things, working out things. And he said, I wanted to go into something I didn't know about. And so And then he went on a bit, and he said, then this thing came up that, and I didn't know about. I didn't know how to know about or any of that stuff. So he really wanted to go into the world of not knowing.
Mm.
And then his nephew needed a kidney transplant, and they tested him, and he would have worked with him, but they wouldn't say that. He had to tell the kid himself, because if he didn't want to give up a kidney, they didn't want to pressure him socially, so that sort of thing. They don't want to do that to you. And so he thought about it a lot, and he thought of the reasons it endanger his health and things like that. And he didn't know his nephew really at all, and so, but it was something he really didn't know about, he felt. And then the next sentence was, so I'm 6 weeks post-transplant.
Oh, really?
Wow. And so he stepped into the not knowing and donated a kidney, and that was,
wow.
He was a gutsy guy. He was a martial artist, and, and I liked him. He was kind of a tough guy, but very kind, But anyway, so the not knowing can have very specific things like that. I don't know if I should give a kidney or not. There's no right or wrong answer to it,
Yeah.
And kidneys don't last that long anyway, and then the kid will need another kidney and all that sort of stuff, But it was touching, and then and so gradually he started coming to retreats, and then gradually he came to more retreats, and so now he's a core member. He's on my board now.
Oh, really?
But he's
wow.
I was very touched by that, because you don't know whether you should or not. You can't know. It's one of those things you just look in your heart, and eventually you get a yes or a no. If you don't get a yes, you shouldn't do it, So yeah.
Oh, wow, that's a beautiful story. Wow.
Yeah.
John, we're getting close to the end of our chat here, but as a Zen practitioner, I think, would you accede to doing a little few-minute meditation?
Absolutely. Right away. Can I? We have original sound. Can I hit a bell?
Absolutely. You can hit a bell and whatever it is.
Very good. This is our temple, one of our temple bells.
Beautiful. Maybe do it again, then I'll shut up.
You can keep talking. I can keep hitting the bell through your talking. Zen has no obstacles. So just hear the bell. This is a meditation, a short meditation. But there's no limit to meditating. So don't think, nothing will happen at short. Just don't think anything about it. Hear the bell. The eternal ancient sound of the temple bell. And meditation always begins by just feeling your life, feeling the time, just feeling what is it to be you? You don't need an opinion about that. Just notice what your current opinion is. You don't have to keep your opinion, but just notice what you're noticing. Yeah. What is it? What is it like? Feeling the time, the old masters used to say. What is it like to be you? Without trying to change things or improve yourself, without rejecting anything that comes into the mind or the heart. Just knows, and that's the not knowing is most intimate. And if you like to hold on to a saying, you can repeat to yourself, not knowing is most intimate. But if you just feel the time, that's enough. And I'll just ring the bell again so you can just hear the bell. And you can enter through that sound. not holding on to things, they fall away. And if they don't fall away, your opinion about them, about holding on, falls away. So the world comes to peace. I'll ring one final bell. Just a little bit of meditating is so wonderful. It's like fills the universe.
Yeah, it's like we offer to people what we call them micro doses.
Nice.
A little saying, a little mantra of it, or a little of this, a little of that. Yeah.
That's a micro dose.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing for people. Yes, of course, there is a formal sitting practice that one can engage with, but just like taking a break at different moments during the day, John will send you a recommendation to get that bell, because that bell has a certain resonance, okay?
It's been used in many, many retreats.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, we have one too. Thank you so much, John, for that.
Thank you, Raghu. It's a delight to meet you and to know all these wonderful things going on around you and with your friends and stuff. So perhaps I don't know if you're up for I come to Santa Barbara sometimes. I can visit you.
Oh, absolutely. And yes, please, please. And by the way, we will have in the show notes on the Mindrolling on Be Here Now Network, we will have links to not just the Buddha book, but a couple of the other books that John mentioned. So we want to do that. And of course, how to be in touch with him and join a retreat and so on. And I did mention this course we have coming, Intimacy with All Things. There's some great, great stuff from many different people.
Such a great title,
Yeah. Ram Dass, Alan Watts, and Jack, and so on. And we have live teachers. So just go to ramdas.org and put your name in the email list. And then I think at some point, the end of March, we'll be announcing the availability of it. So I wanted to make sure everybody had that.
Thank you, Raghu. It's a delight to meet you. So
same here, John. I'm so happy this finally came to be.
Yeah. The universe wanted it. Very good.
Thank you. See you, everybody. Go to BeHereNowNetwork.com and catch a lot of wonderful podcasts. Ram Ram.